Welcome everyone to Daf Yomi 1 week at a time. We are in Masechet Pesachim. This is our 14th class. So kol hakavod to everyone joining us. Today we are going to be discussing Daf 88 through 94. We are going to conclude the 8th chapter, and we are going to begin the 9th chapter. And I'll just make a plug now, and I'll do it again at the end. Next Sunday, we are going to be starting the 10th and final chapter of Masechet Pesachim, and this is the moment everyone has been waiting for. The last chapter is all about the Seder night, the different customs that we have, the different mitzvot that we have. So first of all, get excited, and second of all, if you know other people that would be interested in focusing on the laws and the customs of the Seder night, please tell them to join. So that will be already next Tuesday night. We're going to finish the 9th chapter and then begin the 10th chapter together. And there will be 3 weeks of those classes where we will be discussing the Seder and all of its customs. Okay, so let's begin. Daf 88. The daf begins with the Gemara describing the fact that God sent the Jewish people to
Rabbi,
Babel.
can you please make sure to just name the dafs when you go along, please? Thank you.
Sure. We are on the top of 88, and on this daf, the Gemara describes the fact that we were sent to exile to Bavel. And the question is, why were we sent to Bavel? We discussed it a little bit last week, but this week, at least at the top of 88, the Gemara says that Bnei Israel were sent to Bavel because the dates of Bavel were so good, and this way we had something to eat while we were in exile. However, the Gemara quickly afterwards says, well, the truth is they're very cheap there, but they're not so good, and they hurt your stomach, and you are in exile, so don't enjoy yourself too much. From here, we actually have a number of visualizations today, which is very exciting, from Daf HaChaim, which we've had in the past. So here, this is, I think it's a famous, it's definitely a famous Braita. I actually teach this a number of times. The idea that the Beit HaMikdash, that the temple was called the house of God, the house of the God of Jacob. And the question is, why is the temple called specifically the house of Jacob's God and not anybody else's? And not the other of the forefathers. And the Gemara explains that each one of the forefathers is kind of compared to something else. And it says, I'm sorry, this is in Hebrew, but I'll translate, that Avraham is likened to a mountain, or at least his relationship with God was on a mountain, right? He goes to the mountain to sacrifice Yitzchak. So Abraham is like a mountain. Yitzchak is likened, or his relationship to God is like a field, because that's where he prayed to God. He was in the field. And Yaakov is actually called, or his relationship is like a house. And therefore, the temple is really like a house, and therefore it is associated with Jacob. And these 3 symbols, there's a lot one could do. We can actually have a whole shiur on this. A mountain, a field, and a house, right? A mountain is quite distant, very far. A sadeh, a field, is a little closer. But ultimately, you want God to enter your house. So that's one idea. You can really, there's a lot of symbolism here. So I challenge you all to think about that. The Gemara continues and talks about the ingathering of the Jewish people and how that is likened to the day of creation of the heavens and the earth. There's going to be one leader, Everyone is going to come together, and it is going to be miraculous. Okay, let's get back to our discussion of what we actually started this discussion last week, which is can what happens when somebody slaughters the Pesach offering for somebody else. And here we have a discussion about an orphan, and the Mishnah last week mentioned that an orphan can choose who he wants to, like which benefactor, which I would say guardian is going to be the one he's going to eat with. And the Gemara says he can choose. And again, the Gemara says, oh, does that mean there's actually retroactive designation? Again, we're still on Daf 88. This is called Breira, and the Gemara says, no, we're not talking about retroactively deciding who was going to slaughter the Pesach for this orphan. Rather, the head of the household is going to slaughter his sacrifice for everybody in his household. Who does this include? So this includes minors, but it does not include adults. Right? Adults need to register. So let's say you have adult children. The adult children need to register or tell their parents that they want to be included in the Pesach offering. Just like your adult children, it's very nice when they call you and tell you that they want to come to your house for Shabbat. They don't just show up, right? We want to cook, we want to prepare. The same thing with the Korban Pesach. You need to register in advance. What about slaves? The Gemara discusses that slaves, let's say they decided to do it on their own, but the master also has them in mind. They need to eat with the master because, again, they are the property of the master, and the master is going to designate who is going to eat with him. However, says the Gemara, not the wife, right? The wife, again, is an adult, is an independent person, mostly, and she can protest, meaning she can decide. Again, the husband generally has the wife in mind, but the wife can decide, no, she wants to join a different group. So again, the wife does not need to register beforehand. However, right, if she decides she wants to be in a different group, right, she decides this year she's going to eat with her friends. She could decide to do that. What about a slave with two masters? The Gemara says that they cannot eat with either of them because they needed consent from both masters to tell them which one they were going to eat with. What about somebody who is half a free person and half a slave? The Gemara explains, what does this mean? It means that originally this person was owned by two people. One of them still owns them. The other one set him free, and therefore he is half free and half a slave. And here again, it's problematic because he's neither free nor a slave, and therefore the Gemara explains that we actually force the other master to set him free because this is really a very difficult situation for this man. Okay, we're now up to the Mishnah on 88, and the Mishnah says, what happens, again, we have a case where the master tells a servant to go and slaughter an animal for him for Pesach. Now, we have said this before. The Korban Pesach, the sacrifice, can be either a goat or a sheep, and you can decide which one you want. Okay, so we actually have three cases. Case number one is that the master tells the slave to go and slaughter an animal, but he doesn't stipulate if it should be a goat or a sheep. Again, or here we have in this case, again, if the master asks for a goat and then the slave went and got a sheep or opposite, so then we say to him, whichever one you want, so then that's the one you can eat, and the other one is going to be for me. What about if he doesn't? This was the case where the master didn't stipulate. What happens if the master did stipulate, but the slave forgot which one the master wanted? So here the case is that the slave forgets. So he should go, the Gemara says that he should go and slaughter both a sheep and a goat. And then he should make a stipulation. And he should say, well, if my master wanted the goat, so then he takes the goat and I'll take the sheep. And if not, vice versa. And then the Gemara says, well, how does this work? Again, is it retroactively going to become the masters and the other one is going to become the slaves? And then we say, no, if his master, as you see here, right, if the owner is a king or a queen, so they don't care which animal it is, so then he just takes the first one. But if not, so then we say, right, so then we say, again, if the owner is a regular person, so now the Gemara says, well, he can't eat from either one because we don't know which one he wants. And as we said before, you can't be registered for two animals for the Korban Pesach. And again, how does the slave also manage to do this on his own? So then the Gemara says, no, this is not the case. It actually... it's not clear which one he eats, but either way, the master does not need to eat from, or he doesn't have to bring a second Korban Pesach on Pesach Shaini. We're going to talk more about that in a little bit. We'll leave it at that, and we'll talk about it more in a little while. So the Gemara says he doesn't need to bring a second Pesach, even if he forgets which animal he wanted. And he, one second. Sorry, if everyone can just mute themselves, I would appreciate it. Okay, great. So the Gemara says that that actually he, as you see here, right, he can't eat from either one, and they both need to be burnt. We now have another case. There are 5 hides that got of a Korban Pesach, meaning 5 animals that were Korban Pesach, that were sacrifices, and they got mixed up. And you look at one of them, and one of them has a blemish. Now, we know that a sacrifice cannot have a blemish. Now, what's the problem? It seems that one of the 5 groups did not eat a valid sacrifice. What do? So the Gemara says that you have to burn all of these hides. You have to get rid of them. But the owners do not need to bring another Pesach, meaning they are considered as if they brought a valid Korban, and all 5 of them are okay. Why? The Gemara explains that they can't bring 5 new ones because 4 out of the 5 were totally valid. And at the top of 89, we try over and over to construct a case of how it could be. Maybe we can figure out a way that we could say one of them was invalid, the other 4 are valid, and only one person needs to redo, or maybe all 5 of them need to redo it. So let's see what the cases are. The top of 89 says that you can stipulate either, right, you take 5 new sacrifices and you say, either I needed to bring the Pesach, so then my animal is a Pesach, and if I didn't need to bring a Pesach, so then my sacrifice is going to be what's called a shlamim. A shlamim is another sacrifice that one can voluntarily bring, and then I say either this or this, meaning I'm going to bring a whole new sacrifice. If I needed to bring a Pesach, it's a Pesach, and if not, so then not. But the Gemara says, no, this is a problem because the sacrifice that's a shlamim is different in terms of how it is brought, how it's sacrificed when compared to the Korban Pesach. And therefore, you're going to have problems on how are the priests going to bring this Korban, because we don't know, is it a Passover Korban, is it a Korban Pesach, or is it a shlamim? So then we say, oh, let's say that it is, let's say that again, the Pesach offering doesn't need what's called smicha. Smicha means when you rest on the sacrifice, like on the animal. It's a way of transferring, I would say, I don't want to say liability, but you're kind of transferring yourself onto this animal, and the animal is then sacrificed on the altar. As I mentioned, the Pesach offering does not need smicha because again, there's no guilt, there's no personal. I would say there's no. There's no personal, I guess, culpability when you're bringing this korban, but other korbanot, other sacrifices do need smicha, and therefore we really do have an issue on we can't bring 5 new sacrifices, and therefore the Gemara concludes, no, nobody brings a new sacrifice, and everybody is considered as if they brought a valid sacrifice. Okay, let's go to the next Mishnah on 89. A person tells his sons, I will include you in my Pesach sacrifice for whoever gets to Jerusalem first, right? He calls up his 5 sons and he says, on your mark, get set, go. Whoever gets here first, you can come to Pesach dinner, right? You are considered registered for our sacrifice. The Mishnah says that when the first person gets there, right, the first child gets there, when his head and the majority of his body is in Jerusalem, so then he merits being part of the Pesach with his brothers. Now, this line seems a little strange because, as I mentioned, the father said it was a race. So it seems like it's supposed to be one and not everybody. So the Gemara again asks, is this what we call breira? Is this retroactive designation? Meaning, as soon as the first person gets there, he retroactively becomes registered for the korban, for the sacrifice. The Gemara says no, right? The father really wanted all of his children with him for Pesach. So really, he had everybody in mind, right? And we see that from the fact that it says he merits the Pesach with his brothers, right? If anybody has young children, you say, let's have a contest. Whoever picks up the most blocks wins. And in the end, you say, oh, everybody's a winner, right? We want everyone to win. We want everybody to be involved. Really, it was just a motivation to get all the children to come to Jerusalem as fast as possible. Here, the Gemara adds, right? What about a case where there was a case where the father told his children, which included daughters and sons, and guess who got to Jerusalem first? The daughters, right? The daughters beat the sons, and the Gemara here says this proves that women are zrizim. They are what's the word? Zealous. They are excited. They're motivated, and men are lazy. Feel free to quote, print, and put this up wherever you want. Whoever says that the Gemara is sexist should read that line. Okay, it's one line, but it's a good one. Okay, let's continue. The Gemara also continues and says that you can register people as long as, right, how many people can be registered for the Korban Pesach? So the Gemara says that you can register as many people as you want, as long as everybody can eat a kazait, meaning an olive's amount, a volume of an olive. Again, you have some pictures here of the animal. Sorry for any vegetarians listening, but right, you cut up this sacrifice. If everybody has a piece, so you can cut it up into as many pieces as you want. And you have till the slaughtering, till the shechita. You cannot add people after the shechita, or another option is till the zrikat hadam, till you put the blood on the altar. And then after that, the registration is closed, and that is it. The next Mishnah on 81 says, what about someone who registered someone else with him without asking the group? Right? Imagine someone invites you to a party and you bring somebody else. You didn't get a +1 invitation and you bring someone else. Is it nice? Not really. But what happens? So the group says, you know what? You registered, and maybe you registered for a certain piece. Here's your piece and go, right? You want to share your piece with someone else? Okay, great. But they basically tell him to go eat somewhere else. The Gemara says exactly a similar idea, right? If one person eats more than the others, they can tell him to, right? Can they tell him, listen, you got a certain piece, you got the drumstick, that's it. You don't get more. Everybody gets an equal portion, and you need to leave. So it seems from our Mishnah, you are allowed to kick out this person. I give you what you registered for. That's it. The Gemara says, no, no, no. The Mishnah was talking about when you brought an extra person. That already is too much. But if you want to eat a little bit more, they don't really have the right to kick you out of the group. And here, there's a braita that we actually quoted a few chapters ago, and it says that the servant, the person who is serving the food, what happens if he picks in the kitchen? Now, this is problematic because remember we talked, I think even last week, about being in the place where, right, if you start eating your Korban Pesach, you can't move from that place. So if the servant starts eating in the kitchen, now the Braita says if you're smart, you eat enough in the kitchen, and therefore you're full and you're done. If you're not so smart, now you're still hungry. You can't leave. You have to stay in the kitchen to eat your food. If the group, again, it seems from here that the servant, the shamash, it's not a slave, it's, let's say, the waiter. It seems that the waiter is also included in the group. And the Gemara says if the people are nice, they pick up their chairs, they move to the kitchen, and they all eat around the stove with the waiter so that he doesn't feel, alone. Okay. Okay, let's keep going. Again, it seems to then be a discussion if you can split into two groups or not. And here we have an interesting story about Rav Papa, who ate more than Rav Huna, and a discussion again about someone eating more and someone eating less. Right, if you're ever at a meal and you watch, right, you tell your children don't take too much, make sure the guests get first, right? This idea of eating a lot at a meal when there are a lot of other people who need to eat as well. Okay, now let's talk about the money. How do we, let's take a step back. How does one register for the Korban Pesach? So it seems from Daf 89 at the bottom that a person registers by giving money, right? You say, please count me in. Here is $10 towards the price of our goat or our sheep. I want the polka. Please reserve it for me and I'll meet you for dinner. Let me know what time to be at your house. So the question here is, what is the status of the money? Is the money, so now in general, if you set aside money to buy a sacrifice, that money becomes kadosh, it becomes sanctified. However, here, the Gemara says that that money is what's called chulin. It is mundane, it is not sanctified, it's plain regular money. And what's the practical application? We say in Gemara language, what is the nafkamina? What's the practical application? Well, let's say I have extra money. What can I do with that extra money? Is the money sanctified and therefore I have to buy something that's connected to the animal? Meaning I have to tell the shepherd, I need an animal that is the value of $1,136 because that's exactly what I have, or shekel, because about 1,000 shekel is I think is a sheep. Or can I say, oh, I have leftovers. Let me buy some side dishes. Let me buy some, some napkins and plates and forks and knives. What can I do with the money? So the Gemara basically says that no, you have to, the money is somehow sanctified, but not really. And you should use the money to buy another animal as a voluntary sacrifice. The Gemara says, why? You just said that the money is not sanctified. So the Gemara says, you're right. It's not really sanctified, but it's a fine, meaning all the money that was given was meant to go to the animal. And therefore, even though really it's not sanctified, you should not use it to go, buy paper goods, right? You need to use it towards something kadosh, something that has holiness. Okay, the top of 90, then it discusses again this idea of the money, the value. So one concept is what's called mamon ba'alim, meaning the money is really not sanctified, not for God. It's still part of the owners, right? It's really still my money. I should do something good with it, but I can't really put it in my pocket, or maybe I can. Let's see. So that's mamon ba'alim, means the money still belongs to me. The other next concept is what's called etnan zona. Etnan zona is the money that is used to pay for a prostitute. You are not allowed to take that money that was used to pay for a prostitute to then go and buy a sacrifice. So, interestingly enough, a very religious prostitute wants to take the money that she makes. She takes her salary, and she now wants to go to buy an animal for the Korban Pesach. She cannot take her money that she earned for a sacrifice. However, if the money was sanctified before it was used as payment for the prostitute, then as long as it was sanctified beforehand, you could then take that money and use it to buy a sacrifice. Meaning, once it is sanctified, once it's kadosh, that's it. It cannot be, I guess we would say, defiled. It does not become defiled. She could take that money and use it to buy her sacrifice. Okay, so now let's get to the case. The Gemara says on 90, a man registers a prostitute with him in his sacrifice for the Pesach. And the Pesach money still belongs to the owner. So then, is that okay or not? Right? Or maybe he set it aside and now he has leftover money from the sacrifice. Is it considered chulin, again, unsanctified, or kadosh, or is it sanctified? And the Gemara says, no, he can use the leftover money for whatever he wants. The Gemara says, well, if he paid her, as I mentioned, if he paid her with something sanctified already, then that's okay. But if not, then no. Because again, it basically kind of soils that money, and it can no longer be used in order to buy a sacrifice. Okay, the Gemara then continues and says that you need to register more people if you don't have enough money to pay for the actual sacrifice, right? Let's say we know to buy a sheep costs 1,000 shekel. So I guess a third of that in dollars. So let's say I now get my 3 friends together and everybody says, I have 100 shekel. Oh no, I don't have enough money. What do? I call my other friends and I say, listen, guys, I need you to come and chip in because we don't have enough to buy the actual sacrifice. Okay, again, sorry, Ilana is asking, what does it mean that the money is sanctified? If the money is sanctified, it means that the money needs to be used for a sacrifice, basically. So you need to buy another sacrifice with that money. You cannot pocket it or put it back, use it for anything else. If it is not sanctified, then you can do whatever you want with it, meaning you could put it back in your pocket, you could buy whatever you want. If it's sanctified, it can only go to the temple. So here again, maybe you can use it for something that's connected to the sacrifice, like buying the wood to burn, to roast the animal. Or again, maybe I can buy matzah and maror, right? The bitter herbs and the matzah, right? Again, that is part of the Pesach experience. Maybe I can use the money for that. Maybe, says another opinion, is I can take the money and buy new clothes for the holiday. This is actually in the Gemara, right? Buying new clothes for the holiday is a way for one to get excited, to feel the excitement of the holiday, and therefore maybe I can use that money to buy new clothes. Okay, next Mishnah. Who can be part of our group? Okay, sorry, Ilana is asking another question about the money used to pay a prostitute. Let's say the prostitute, as I mentioned, wants to chip in to be part of the Korban Pesach. So can she use her money that she made in her very not appropriate line of work? That's the question. Okay, let's go back to our next Mishnah on 90. Who can be part of our group? Again, remember we said at the very beginning, if the person is tameh, if the person is impure, he cannot eat from the sacrifice, and therefore he cannot be part of the group. What about, and we're going to go through a number of cases, what about someone who's on their last day of impurity? As we know or don't know, I will review. There are some impurities that are only for one day. And like tamesh sheretz, if you touched one of those creepy crawly, right, a lizard or a rat or something like that, a weasel, you're only tameh, you're only impure for that day, but that night you can eat from the sacrifice. So what about those people? Can they be part of the group? And can you slaughter the animal for them, even though at that exact moment they cannot eat from the sacrifice? However, that night they can eat from the sacrifice. So that's going to be a discussion. Even somebody who is in a 7-day impurity process, or I guess I would say purification process, what if that person is on their last day? If the last day falls out on the 14th of Nisan, can they be part of the group? Because ultimately that night they will be able to eat from the sacrifice. So the Gemara goes through a number of people. Again, the Zav or the Zava, these are people who have some sort of unnatural emission that makes them impure. They do need to wait 7 days. But again, if it is their last day, can they be part of the group or not? The Gemara seems to be, no, they cannot. They have to wait for the next month. The next month is on the 14th of Iyar, we have what's called Pesach Shaini. We have mentioned it before. We're going to mention it again in the next chapter. Pesach Shaini is basically a do-over. You get a second chance. We're going to learn about how we know that that could happen in a little bit. So I'll leave you in suspense for that. Let's continue. Just interestingly, at the bottom of 90, the Gemara discusses the difference of, or I would say the uniqueness of a woman who is menstruating, a nida. She goes to the mikvah at night, the night after 7 full days. She goes to the mikvah at night. All the other people need to go to, they can go to the mikvah during the day, even on their 7th day. They just have to wait till the nighttime in order to be able to eat from the sacrifice. So just interesting, and that is our custom nowadays, that a woman who is in nida, who is menstruating, she can only go to the mikvah at night following her 7 full days, or her 7 clean days. Okay, let's go on to the next Mishnah on the top of 91. We have the concept of a person who's called an onen. Onen means a person whose relative died that day. They have yet to bury the person, and the fear is that the person might touch the dead body and become impure, become tameh. But as of now, they haven't. So the Mishnah says that an onen, or somebody who is excavating a collapsed wall, or somebody who is released from jail that day, or a sick person, all of these people who potentially will not be able to eat it at night, you could shecht for them, meaning they could be part of the original group, but not by themselves. Because again, the idea is that we are concerned that all of these people have the potential to become impure and therefore invalid to be part of the group that's going to eat from this sacrifice, and therefore, as long as there are other people in the group, they can be a part of the group. Okay. And so then the Mishnah says, therefore, if they can't eat the Pesach that night, let's say they do become impure, or they couldn't make it, right? The person who's in jail can't get out of jail or get to Jerusalem. So then they don't need to bring another korban, another sacrifice on Pesach Shaini, the do-over. They don't need to do that because at the time of the shchita, of the slaughtering, they were considered part of the group. And therefore, it is considered valid, and it's as if they brought their sacrifice. The Gemara says, except for somebody who is excavating a collapsed wall, which we will discuss in a second. Okay, the Gemara on 91 explains, first of all, we mentioned that if you're in a jail and the jailer says that you will be, I promise you can go home for Pesach. So the Gemara says it depends what kind of jail you're in. If you're in a jail of Jews where the Jews are controlling the jail, then he can be part of the group because we know that the Jew is going to keep his promise and let him out for Pesach. But if the jail is owned by a non-Jew, then no, he can't be part of the group because we don't trust that the non-Jew will keep his promise, and therefore he can't even be part of the group originally. Okay. The Gemara now says, what do you mean except for the person who's excavating the collapsed wall? The Gemara says, well, we're concerned that maybe there's a dead body under this heap of rubble, and it now depends what shape that heap is. If the heap is round, right, I guess like a kind of dome shape, then we assume that that person is going to be impure no matter what, because when he was walking on the heap, the person was basically on the top at any given point and became impure. However, if it's very oblong, we could construct a case to say that the person was never really over that dead body, and therefore the person is not necessarily impure and could be part of the group. Okay, next Mishnah. The Mishnah says you cannot bring a Korban Pesach for one person, even if that person says, I promise you I can eat an entire lamb. I'm so hungry, I'm going to eat the whole thing by myself. Rabbi Yehuda says, no, there's no such thing as a Korban Pesach by yourself. Rabbi Yossi disagrees. He says the whole idea is that it needs to be eaten. If you can eat it by yourself, great. And the opposite is also the case. If you have 100 people registered and they still can't eat, the whole animal, so then that's also not valid. The Mishnah ends by saying that you can't make a group of women, slaves, and children for the Korban Pesach, which we're going to see in a minute what that means. Okay, so the Gemara now says, okay, what about women? As I mentioned, we're going to discuss women. What does it mean that you can't, that women can't be part, or the group cannot be of women, slaves, and children? The Gemara explains that we're saying you cannot mix women, slaves, and children, or more specifically, we can't have a group of women and slaves. The Gemara says that will lead to impropriety, and we can't have a group of slaves and children, again, because we don't trust the slaves to be proper with the children. However, you can have a group of women and children. That seems to be very natural. Okay, what is the obligation for women on Pesach? So this is actually a difference of opinion. Rabbi Yossi says that on Pesach Shaini, I'll say it in a different way. Rabbi Yehuda says that Pesach Rishon, the regular Pesach, men and women are equally obligated, right? Because it says all souls, nefashot, all souls are obligated. Therefore, all genders are obligated in regular Pesach, the first one. But for Pesach Shaini, the second time, it says specifically, Ish, a man who misses Pesach Rishon, he's going to do Pesach Shaini. So it seems that only a man is obligated to do the second one, again, if you missed the first, but a woman is able to do it. She's permitted, but she is not obligated. Rabbi Yossi disagrees. He says that both Pesachs, meaning the first and the second, a Pesach Rishon, Pesach Sheni a month later, are both obligated for men and women equally. And Rabbi Shimon says, no, a Pesach Rishon is only an obligation for men, and even women, he says, for the first one, in Nisan, women are able to bring, but they are not obligated. So again, we see that there is a difference of opinion. What is the obligation? Rabbi Elazar says that women are obligated for the first one, and the second one, again, as I mentioned, is permissible but not obligatory. The Gemara continues at the bottom of 91, saying that you should not have a group that is entirely made of converts. Interestingly enough, it says because they're going to be so precise, they're actually going to end up invalidating their sacrifice. This does not sound so nice. The question is, what's going on here? So I think it's really important to recognize that in the time of the Mishnah and the Gemara, conversion was not the same as it is nowadays, right? Conversion nowadays is something that I think is taken very seriously. There are courses that are given for months, sometimes even years, where you're really taught every detail of the law. It seems in the time of the Mishnah was not the case, right? You wanted to convert. They said, no, no, no. You said, yes, yes, yes. They said, okay, fine. And hopefully you'll pick up the laws as you went ahead. So they were nervous that another explanation is that, converts are so careful. They don't want to, I would say they're so exacting that in their exactedness, they're going to end up invalidating the sacrifice. So I thought that was just an interesting discussion in terms of who is obligated and how. Okay. Daf 92, the Mishnah continues and says that the onen and the people who buried the body cannot eat. Again, as we mentioned, kodshim, they can't eat from the sacrifice. They go to the mikvah, and then they can eat the Pesach that night, but not other korbanot. Right? What if you heard that somebody died, or there's a reinterment, meaning the person didn't die that day, but died a long time ago, and then you only heard about it? That person can go to the mikvah and then eat from all other sacrifices already that day. What about a convert who converts actually on that day? They could eat the Korban Pesach that night. But somebody who had a brit milah, circumcision, they need to wait 7 days. So the Gemara explains that, again, aninut at night is only rabbinic, and therefore they can eat the Korban Pesach. And then there's a discussion about why does the person who got a brit milah, circumcision, need to wait 7 days? Again, we want to teach them that that impurity is 7 days, right? Again, if not, the next year they're going to say, oh, remember that when I couldn't eat it, so then I could just eat it that night. Maybe this time when I can't eat it because I'm impure, maybe also I can eat it at night. And again, with this, we're going to finish the 8th chapter. And now we're going to do the final chapter that is going to be talking about the sacrifice, the Korban Pesach. So those of you who have been enjoying these chapters about the Korban Pesach, you're going to be sad to see this end. Those of you who have been counting the days till we get to the final chapter, the end is near. So the ninth chapter is going to discuss Pesach Shaini. As I mentioned before, Pesach Shaini is going to be your second chance. So the Gemara is going to talk about this. So the Mishnah says on Daf 92 that if you were impure or you were far away from Jerusalem and you didn't bring the Korban Pesach on the 14th of Nisan, then you must do Pesach Shaini, which is on the 14th of Iyar, the next month, 30 days later. If you forgot, okay, in general, if you forgot the first Pesach, you can also bring Pesach Shaini. Okay, the Gemara says that if you were included in a group, then you're okay. But if not, then no. Meaning the question is, can you tell somebody, I live really far. Can you shech the Korban Pesach for me, have me in mind? So there's a machloket whether or not you can do that or not. Daf 93 seems to imply that you cannot do that. Okay, we now have a three-way machloket on Daf 93, where it says that Rebbe says that if you miss first Pesach and then you miss the second Pesach, you are liable for karet, again, a very serious punishment for both of them, because Rebbe says that the second chance, Pesach Shaini, is actually its own, I would say, its own festival, in the sense that you got a second chance, you missed it, you're again liable for not bringing the Korban Pesach. Rabbi Natan says no, you get karet for missing the first Pesach, but you had an opportunity to bring it again the second time, but if you didn't, you don't get karet, because that was just a do-over. You didn't take advantage, but you don't get penalized for it. Rabbi Hanania ben Akavia says, no, they're intrinsically linked. The only time you get karet for missing Pesach Rishon, the first Pesach, is when you miss the second one as well. When you miss both, that's when you get karet, meaning they're intrinsically linked. And therefore, again, what's the nafkamina? What's the practical application? What about somebody who couldn't bring Korban Pesach Rishon, the first one, but could bring it the second one, right? What's the case? Somebody who converts after Pesach, right? So after Pesach, they're like, wow, my neighbor was having such a great time. I want to be Jewish. And then they convert. Can they bring the Korban Pesach a month later at Pesach Shaini or not? Or the next case is, what about somebody who is bar or bat mitzvah, right? When their birthday is after Pesach, right? But before Pesach Shaini. So they couldn't bring Pesach Rishon, but they could bring. So now, according to Rebbe, who says there are two separate holidays, so then he says, great, you missed the first one, but now you get a new opportunity. But the other two opinions say, no, the only time you get a do-over is if it's a do-over, meaning if you could have brought it on the first one, but for some reason you didn't, that's when you bring Pesach Shaini. But if you couldn't bring the first Pesach, you don't bring Pesach Shaini. And from there, there is a whole discussion on it's actually a very nice piece of Gemara, because they're all extrapolating the same verse in the Torah. There's a verse that says that if you were pure and you were close and you just didn't bring the Korban Pesach, and then it says ki, right? We use the word ki to say because, but interestingly, in the Gemara, it's important to realize that there are 4 different ways to interpret the word ki. Ki, again, in regular Hebrew, we say because, but the Gemara says it could mean like there's something new, right? A new statement, or it can mean because, or it can mean if. And therefore, each one is translating the word key in a different way. So it's really on 93. It's a good piece of Gemara. It really gets you to understand how are these rabbis interpreting the same verse. It's all the same pasuk. They're just explaining it in different ways. Okay. Okay, now we have a new Mishnah. Okay, we have another picture instead of looking at these sheep and goats. Okay, what does it mean that you were far? It said if you were impure or you live far away, so then you can bring Pesach Shaini. So what does it mean you're far? The first opinion is Rabbi Akiva, which is that you live the distance of Modi'in. If anybody is familiar with Israel, Modi'in is a city about 15 kilometers, even though the Mishnah says, or the Gemara is going to say 15 mil, which is a Roman mile. It's actually about 14 and a half kilometers. You make a radius around Jerusalem, and anything outside of that radius, you are considered far away. And we're going to see in a minute, it's going to be a half a day's walk. The other opinion, Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yossi say, what does it mean far away? You are outside of the temple. Now, that seems a little interesting. Well, you're outside the temple, that's far away. We're going to see what that means in a minute. Okay, how do we get to this idea of 15 mil? The Gemara explains that a person can walk 40 mil a day, 40 kilometers a day. I don't know, that seems like a really long, a far way to walk. But basically, you can walk 5 mil from I would say daybreak till sunrise, which we learn from Lot. Then from sunrise to midday is 15. From midday to sunset is 15. And then another 5 from sunset to nightfall, which is right again when the stars come out. And therefore, this is the time when, again, this person can get to Jerusalem in time for the shchita, for the slaughtering of the Korban Pesach. Okay. The Gemara continues. What about we mentioned? So now let's go to the top of 94, today's daf. What is, again, we talk about being outside of Modi'in. What if, as my students asked, what if, again, we're talking about walking? It's a half a day walk to Jerusalem. But what if I have a really fast horse? Let's say I live in Tel Aviv. And if I get on my horse, I could really make it to Jerusalem in time. Am I considered far away or not? So the Gemara says you are considered far away because you are outside the radius that we mentioned. What if I live close to Jerusalem, but I get stuck in traffic? And now I didn't make it to Jerusalem. Am I liable for not bringing the Korban Pesach? The Gemara says yes. You should have left earlier. You should have checked ways. You should have taken another route. But because your home, your starting point, was within the radius of Jerusalem, then you should have made it your business to get to Jerusalem in time. From here, there's an interesting discussion since we're talking about how long it takes to walk from a certain time to a certain time. The Gemara seems to say, or Rava seems to say, that the world is 6,000 parsaot, I guess like a Persian mile. And we learn it from this, you can see here this picture, that the sun travels 6,000 parsa from sunrise to sunset. Therefore, kind of all of civilization is under that arc, and therefore it must be that the world is 6,000 parsot. Then there's a whole discussion about the thickness of the heavens and different fractions, ratios between the heaven and the earth. I'm sure there's a lot here to kind of dig deeper, like what are we talking about in terms of the distance of the heavens and the distance of the earth and its relationship. there's a whole relationship that right hold on, where are my notes to that? Right, that Egypt is a 60th of Cush. Oh, that's good, because Cush is from the Megillah, so that's a good, like, wishing everybody a Purim Sameach, right? Mihodu ve'ad Cush. So Mitzrayim, Egypt, is a 60th of Cush, which is a 60th of the whole world, which is a 60th of Gan Eden, right? The Garden of Eden, which is a 60th of Eden itself, which is a 60th of hell. Again, as I mentioned, it's an interesting discussion. Why are we comparing all these things? So I leave you to think about all those connections. Let's go to the end of 94. There's an interesting discussion. Again, anybody who is into astronomy, I apologize, because again, the Gemara, the Mishnah and the Gemara are really discussing the science of the day. So in the science of the day, there's actually a machloket, a difference of opinion on what rotates around what. So let's just, for our science review, right, we all know, I think, that the Earth, the Earth spins on its axis, right, in 24 hours, and it revolves around the sun, right? The sun does not revolve around the Earth, but even though that's what we see in nature. Now, interestingly enough, right, what is the relationship between the stars in the heavens? Right, so again, they believed that the stars rotated around the Earth, even though we know that that's true or not true. The way the astronomers of the time understood it was there was like this big wheel in the sky, a galgal, a wheel. And the question is, what was rotating? So the Gentiles basically said that there were two separate like wheels, one for the constellation and one for the sun, and they kind of like moved around to accommodate the other one and the other. But the Jews believed, no, there's only one wheel, and kind of like the constellations kind of move around to help the sun, move around the Earth. So then I thought it was just a great discussion about what happens to the sun at night, right? Where does it go? So there are two theories. One is, again, two theories in the Gemara. One is, interestingly enough, right, the sun like kind of penetrates the heavens. It goes across the sky. Then it kind of goes out, and it goes like above, kind of like, think about it going out of a tent, and then it goes like outside, and then it comes back in the morning and does that over and over again. So that's one option. The Gentiles, that was the Jewish option, which you'll see the Gemara is going to say no, right? The Gentiles say no. The sun, right, comes to the other, rises in the east, sets in the west, and then it actually goes under the earth. How can they prove that it goes under the earth? I thought this was great. Because that groundwater, right, is warmer at night. How did it get warm at night? It must be that the sun went underground and heated up groundwater. So again, I thought it's just fascinating, this idea that, like, let's look at nature and prove what happens in the cosmos based on what I see around me. The Gemara talks about 4 paths of the sun, right? The sun goes to different places based on the time of the year, right? In the spring, it goes to the mountains to melt the snow. In the summer, it goes to the field to help the crops. In the fall, it goes to the ocean to dry out the rivers. In the winter, it kind of leaves civilization, right? It's very cold. It leaves civilizations so as not to dry out the seeds in the field. Again, I love these like little, I love these concepts, because I think although we know scientifically this is not true, I think that it's beautiful for the Gemara to kind of say, let me look at what's going on in my world and say, wow, God is so perfect and miraculous that, like, he puts the sun exactly where it needs to be based on my crops, on my field, right? Again, Judaism is very agriculturally based, and God basically is so wondrous that everything is perfect, even to the seasons and where the sun is in those seasons. So I just think it's just so beautiful to think about how you look at nature and how you see God in nature instead of saying, "Oh, it's winter and I'm cold." The sun is just not here because I'm cold, and complain about that. So I don't know. I think it's really beautiful. I think with that we're going to end. And again, looking forward to continuing our learning next week. I want to wish everybody a Purim Sameach. Have a really beautiful Purim holiday, and looking forward to learning with you next week. Everybody.